Recently, Dixie Belle came out with a new product, Terra, which is a clay-based paint similar to DIY paint. And we wanted to see just how similar and which paint we actually like better. Now, I've not used Terra. By customer request, we started stocking Terra here at Great American, our Jacksonville retail store, and we wanted to see which paint we like better and how it works on different surfaces. So I have some ceramics, I have some silver platters, and I have a wood base that I want to do some blending on. So we're going to try it in these different formats, along with some additional techniques that we hope you'll enjoy, and we're going to compare which we like better. Terra, a clay-based paint, being new to the market, has much fewer color choices. And they also only have one size, and the only finishing products they have are a finishing cloth, the top coat, a wax, and a buffing pad. DIY paint is all natural, only 9 ingredients. It is non-VOC. As you can see, it comes in 3 sizes, an 8 ounce, a 16 ounce, and a 32 ounce, and it comes in significantly more colors. We also have a wide range of products to match the DIY paint and interact with it to expand your ability to make beautiful products. I wanted to keep this as even as possible as far as trying out them. So I'm going to do 2 ceramic jars that are identical in both the Terra and in the DIY paint. I'm going to start off by painting all 4 of these jars in a similar color. The differences between the color is unimportant. Right now, I am just looking for how the product performs.
Firefly, how short is life? I dreamt we had more than 20. I have seen this before, and I have lived more than plenty.
Now, after 2 coats, I'm starting to see a difference. The Terra definitely is streakier. It does not have as much pigmentation and is not covering as well as 2 coats of DIY paint. So there are some places that I need some touch-ups, but when you compare the touch-ups that I need on Terra, it's pretty significant. So I am going to go back and do a 3rd coat on Terra. After I do a 3rd coat, I am going to let everything dry completely. While that dries, I'm going to go ahead and start on the next project. And here I'll be using Wisteria on a silver tray by Terra and Petticoat Pink on a tray for DIY paint. I'm using Klingon brushes for both of these projects, so I want to make sure, again, that everything is as equal as possible. And if you are curious about getting any of these products, I will have links in the description below where you can purchase them. After 2 coats of both DIY paint and Terra, both trays are looking about the same. There might be slightly more that you can see on the tray from Terra, but I'm going to wet distress this, so in the end it won't matter. I'm going to leave these as they are. Because wet distressing is a common way that we finish our pieces, I want to be sure to show you how both these pieces wet distress. In the end, I think they wet distressed about equally, and once the wet distressing is done, I'm going to give them both a matte top coat. And so for this piece, I wanted to try wood, and I have the colors Malachite and Blue Moon, and I want to do a blend on this wood board. So I'm going to go ahead and start by laying the Malachite. Now I'm going to do the work of blending. I'm not going to try and talk over this. I'm just going to put some music on and let you watch. But basically, we're going to do this on 2 coats, and I've given a little bit of a softball into the Terra here in that the colors are more similar than the difference in the range for the DIY paint. And so I'm not looking at how good of a blending job I did. I'm looking at how easy it was to blend these 2 paints. And also, one of the things that I sort of dislike about DIY paint is it dries so much later, so sometimes it's a little bit hard to tell exactly how your blend looks. I want to see if I have the same problem, especially with these deep, rich colors as I do with DIY.
I know sorrow, I know pain.
It will be more obvious in a minute after I sand and wipe this off. I'm going to add a top coat, and you can see there is definitely a color change. So it definitely was lighter when it dried. So one of the problems that I commonly find with the clay-based paint, because they are water reactivated, when I use a liquid top coat like I'm using now, I do find that it sort of disrupts my blend a little bit because the water activation from the middle is pulled out to the end, and you know, the outside is pulled into the middle. Now, I'm not going to worry about that on this piece, but if you have a really perfect blend, I would probably recommend using wax. Now I'm going to repeat the process for DIY, and this is going to be a much more abrupt change. So it's going to be a little harder blend, and so don't take off points for the blending. I'm trying to see how they each blend and the color change between dry and blending. I also had some little issues where my paint was a little more dried out than it should have been, so I needed to add too much water, and then I got some speckles. So again, this is really about the performance of the paint, not my skills.
If I'm ready. All them skies know our names. When it's time, burn me steady. Then lay me in the ocean.
When I left the workshop the other night, everything was perfectly base coated and had 2 to 3 coats of top coat on them. I left them to dry for 24 hours so that I would come back the next day and start adding transfers, you know, the fun part of the job. At this point, I would say there wasn't a huge difference between Terra and DIY paint. There was a slight scent with Terra. It wasn't a bad scent, but it smelled a little bit like dry beans. You know, if you've made dry beans and soaked them and you're rinsing the beans out, so I guess they're not dry anymore at that point, soaked beans. Anyway, it smelled a little bit like that. So it was a natural scent. It wasn't a terrible scent, but it's definitely has a scent. So I do want to add that. And of course, the coverage on the ceramic was not good for Terra, but on the silver tray and on the wood, I would say they were pretty neck and neck. For this tray, I'm going to start off with Morning Peonies and Scripture, and this is my DIY tray.
Let's drink up, your death look like big fun. Come on, let's get it on. Like that Marvin Gaye song. I'm stunning, you love it. Come on, give me something. I know that you want it. Come on.
When you are working with transfers and you're going into a corner like this, it is important to sort of work your way into the corner first, or you can do the flat area and then go up the curve. But it's important that you don't attempt to lay both the top of the curve and the bottom of the curve down first. You want to make sure you get that curve before you go over it, so to speak. And this will help eliminate cracks and wrinkles in your transfer. Now, it's almost impossible, I'll say, to actually eliminate all cracks and transfers when you're going around a curved surface. So just be aware you can attempt to minimize those by just going slow, taking your time, and again, working that curve area first. I also decided to add a couple of butterflies from the Papillion collection. I really like adding butterflies, and I have found that my customers do too. So this is a very popular transfer for me to keep on hand in general, because adding a little butterfly here or there really can make a piece. Moving on, I've decided to add the secret letter 2, which is a white transfer. I thought I would show this because it's a little bit unusual. I've got a dark surface, so I'm kind of going to work in reverse. You can see I've got some royal peacocks to my right as well. And my goal is to add this white text and then add the peacocks. And so I've just kind of decided how I'm going to lay it out. And we're going to do transfers the way we always do. It's almost immediate when I realize that I have a problem. You can see that it's getting darker around the transfer instead of lighter, and that typically means that the paint is sticking to the transfer and not the other way around. And here's a close-up where you can see this. Now, I've had this happen before with other paints, including DIY paint, and usually I'm able to work it so that it stays on there. In this case, it was so much, and it was just pulling the paint off the piece. There was nothing I could do but sand. I started off by sanding with my sanding sponge, and that wasn't going to work. So I went out and got my 220 on my orbital sander and sanded it down. As you can see, this is very distressed. I debated about painting it again, but decided not to. And I'm going to stick with my Terra and give it a stencil. I'm using a JRV stencil brush, and I am using the Royal Damask stencil by Dixie Belle. This is probably my very favorite stencil. You see me use it all the time. I'm sure I actually have 2 of them, so that if I'm working on larger projects, that I can tag team them if I have to wash in between. Once I am done stenciling, I actually sand it lightly, brush it off, and then take it out and get 3 coats of polyacrylic spray on it. This will hopefully eliminate any issues as I go back to add the peacock transfers. Now you might have noticed me rubbing the transfer down as I'm pulling this off, and that's because it's still lifting a little bit, but not so much that I'm not able to use it. I am able to get all of this peacock transfer down. Let's take a look and see kind of where it's happening and how it's happening. And when I do this, basically the way I work on it is I just gently pull back and pull the transfer off the plastic and lay it down, and then I'll use my finger to apply some top coat to ensure that they are completely laid down and stuck. And I'll do that a couple times before adding top coat over the entire piece. But I am making sure that everything gets completely stuck down so that there won't be any issues with it peeling up later. After that, I will make sure I liberally add 3 additional coats of top coat. I want to be sure that this thing does not budge. And because that went so poorly, I wanted to be sure that I went straight up into the next tray, which I painted with DIY paint. And I'm starting with a very small butterfly transfer. And the reason for that is because I don't want to ruin this huge transfer if I'm going to run into the same problems. One of the reasons I used basically the same exact products to try on each brand was I wanted to make sure that it wasn't something like the finish on the wood piece that was creating the issues, that it's actually the paint that's making the difference. So everything was exactly the same except for the paint I used. I even actually used Terra's top coat on all of the pieces. Okay, let's move on to the next silver tray. I do silver tray transfers on silver trays all the time. This is going to go really smooth, and I'm super excited to do another tray because I enjoyed the first silver tray that I did, the pink one with DIY, so much. So this will be fun. Did I just say it was going to be fun, that I do this all the time and never have problems? Yeah, well, no, we're definitely having problems. You can see on the plastic that the paint is attaching to the transfer and not the other way around. So yeah, I have another fail. I am pretty grumpy about this at this point. I'm just going to peel it off, sand it down, and repaint the platter.
Wish I could say I was finally over you, but that's not the truth. Everyone always keep falling in love again.
And so now we are back to these little pots, and I'm going to be using French blue. Here are the three different pages of patterns. All of mine are going to come from that first page because it's the one that has the smaller ones. It has 4 petite images, and that's what I'm going to use. With some frustration on the last 2 projects, I have decided that I'm going to start off on the DIY pots. Ceramic is typically where I end up having issues with any paint, and I will say it is most of the time because I do not either top coat it or I top coat it, but I do not leave it ample time to dry, in which case the surface tension pulls the transfer, pulls the paint off the piece. But in this case, for all of the products, I gave 2 coats of top coat at a minimum yesterday, let them dry for 24 hours, and then came back to do the transfers. So I'm working on the DIY first. I will get both of those done, hopefully without any issues. Okay, we got both jars done with DIY paint without any issues. Let's try this again with our Terra Paint and see how we do. We're going to apply the same type of label that we did on the first jar. Yep, you guessed it, the same issue. You can see the paint pulling up onto the transfer versus the other way around. And I'm going to let you see what it looks like underneath as I just sort of rip this Band-Aid off. It's not going to stick. I am not going to do all the work of keeping this on. And yeah, at this point, it is a fail. So I guess I want to discuss ways around this for the future. It is possible that some manufacturers recommend that you do not top coat. And I know with Dixie Belle chalk paint, Dixie Belle recommends that you do not top coat before you add transfers, but you do let it dry overnight. Now, I chose to add a top coat because I know that with DIY paint, I am always best adding a top coat. And that once the pieces were fully dry, I ran my hands over them to feel them and to see if there was any chalkiness or any clay, I guess, any powder form, because I find that with the clay paint, there's a little bit of a powdery residue, sort of like milk paint. And I got color on my hands when I did that. And so that told me that I needed to seal it in order for the transfers to work, because if it had a powdery substance, then surely that would lift when you added the transfer. So I made an educated decision based on that. With this in mind, I have to say, if I were using Terra on furniture or anything and I wanted to add a transfer, then you would have to do one of a couple different things. First, you would either need to add a bonding primer like Boss by Dixie Belle, or Slick Stick by Dixie Belle, or you would need to use a poly top coat and spray it really well. Although I'm not 100% sure that would work based on the peacocks. I think there's an issue with it bonding to the surface, and then the transfer having that surface pressure where you're using the stick and you're rubbing the transfer on, and it's creating some pull. And normally if the paint is fully stuck to the object, then that pulls the transfer off the plastic. In this case, it's pulling the paint off the object is what's happening. And so it's that surface pressure that it's not getting the adhesion to the object that the paint is on. And for me, that's a problem. I have to say, based on this, if I wanted to use transfers, I would not choose Terra. And I'm going to get right to the reveal after this. I do want to let you know, though, in January, I'm going to start a new coaching program. This program will include weekly group coaching, a deep dive skills webinar, and a live expert interview every month, all for only $20 a month. I hope you'll join us. So here are the finished projects. I can't wait to hear what you think about how the projects came out and what your thoughts were about why the fails might have happened. Remember, I treated all of the projects, whether they were DIY or Terra, exactly the same. following manufacturer's directions and painting as I always do, and even doing what I never do, which is letting it dry overnight to ensure that it would have the best outcome. Which of these projects is your favorite? I look forward to reading your comments below. And as always, if you're interested in any of the products I've used, they are in the description below. Dixie Belle is actually going to be on sale for the next 7 days at 20% off on our website, vintagebdesign.com, and I will also have links for the finished projects.